If you've been feeling stuck, too busy to make art, or unsure where to even start, you're not alone. I asked you recently what's holding you back from creating, and so many of you said things like self-doubt, not knowing what to draw, or just feeling overwhelmed. So today, we're keeping it simple. We're using just 3 brushes, and they're all free, to create this cozy oil painting in Procreate. Whether you want to follow along, try your own version, or just watch and get inspired, this tutorial is here to help you slow down, make something beautiful, and enjoy the process. Let's dive in. Here's a quick look at the brushes I'm using today. To sketch, I'm starting with one of my favorites from the Echo It Essentials brush pack. It is called Ember. It's super soft and has just enough texture to feel natural but not distracting. And it's perfect for building out your shapes. Then for the oil painting part, I'm using 3 brushes from my oil sampler set, and you can download these 3 for free. The first is called Highgrove. It's really smooth and pigmented, and it lays down an even buttery wash of color. I use it mostly for the base layers. And then the next one is Cascade. This one's a bit sharper and more textured. It's great for things like clouds, trees, foliage, because it gives you that pulled paint look and adds some really nice movement. And finally, Moonlit. This brush is really fun. It gives you realistic daubs of oil color, but it also adds really pretty tints along the edges that feels really painterly and expressive. I use it mostly for the florals at the end of this piece, and I will show you how each one works as we go, and I'll explain where to grab them a little later in the video. Okay, starting off with Ember, I'm just doing a super loose sketch, nothing fancy, starting with the horizon line and just focusing on the big shapes and the general flow of the entire composition. Starting with the background, just adding some soft mountains here to set the scene. As you can see, Ember is really light and easy to use. It's soft and buildable. It lets me block things in without committing too hard, which is perfect when I'm still trying to figure out the general layout of things. Just sketching, some rolling hills, and this will kind of guide the viewer's eye through the painting. And if you're painting along with me, don't worry about getting things perfect. Just focus on placing your main shapes and just trying to enjoy the process. And then adding in a cluster of trees here. Yes, those are trees, just to balance the right side a bit more. And don't worry, they're not going to stay like this. I will refine them later with texture, adding kind of a distant row of trees here. Like I said, it is not meant to be perfect, but I always find that mapping out your placement really helps me when it comes time to actually laying down the color. Then I'm adding in a dirt road here, and also throwing in some wildflowers. This is going to be more in the foreground, and just really simple shapes for now, but they'll add a nice pop of color later. And then finally, just sketching in the cloud shapes and mostly just the direction I want the clouds to go, so I know where to leave a little space, and I'll be using the Cascade brush for those when I paint them in later. I try to name my layers as I go. This doesn't always happen, but it's a good thing to do regardless. Now that I've got the basic sketch down, I am switching to the Highgrove brush to start blocking in some color. I am keeping my brush size pretty big right now. It helps resist the urge to over detail too early, I find. Highgrove is really smooth and pigmented. It lays down a really even wash of color, which is perfect for the sky and kind of large background areas. I am working right now from back to front, so I'm starting with the sky and keeping it pretty soft and subtle, just letting the brush do most of the work here. And then next I'm moving on to the mountains and distant hills. I like to use slightly cooler, more desaturated tones in the background and just help them, it helps push them back into the space a little bit more. And I did blur out this layer a little bit before going back in with Highgrove, and but this time switching to the smudge tool that is next to the brush on the upper right hand corner, and just blending in these areas a little bit more. Before we jump into the next part, if you want to try out these freebie brushes, you can download Highgrove, Cascade, and Moonlit. These are the exact 3 brushes I'm using in this video as a free sampler, and the link is down in the description below. If you would like the full oil painting brush set with even more textures, dry brushes, blenders, you can grab that by joining my Patreon. That also helps support more tutorials like this, and there's a lot of really valuable resources over there if you want to check it out. Now that I've got the background blocked in, I am switching to the Cascade brush, and this one's got a really textured edge to it, and it is really amazing for adding interest to, trees, clouds, foliage, all of the more organic shapes. I'm starting to build out the midground now, just dropping in some loose tree shapes and hints of like bushes and foliage. I'm still using pretty big shapes at this point, but you'll see how this brush starts to pull color in a really great way. And for these areas, I like to use slightly warmer and more saturated tones to bring them forward. It creates some nice contrast against the cool tones in the distance. This brush also creates these really kind of dry edged marks that I love. You'll notice them especially when I start adding texture to the ground and meadow area. And again, I'm just working on a separate layer here, and so we can easily adjust it or add to it later on. Next, I'm going to focus on the sky for a little bit, adding some moody clouds to really bring the atmosphere to life. So just creating a new layer here, clipping it into the sky layer so it stays contained. And this will make it easier to add and adjust the clouds without affecting the rest of it. And just mixing up a few shades here, navy and different grays and a little bit of white to get almost a stormy thundercloud effect. And still using the Cascade brush here again because it has a lot of textured edges that really helps create that cloud effect. I'm keeping the strokes really loose and directional, just layering in color where I want the darker areas to be. I really like how this brush allows me to get that kind of moody pulled look without overworking it, if that makes sense. Gradually building the clouds, nothing too perfect yet, just focusing on the flow of the storm and how the light might interact with it, and just working on a separate layer so that I can slowly build up depth. Clouds have more of a soft yet layered look to them when you build them up this way. Do you see how the brush pulls that color, creating a really soft, almost dry brush effect? It's really perfect for the kind of stormy, moody texture that I'm going for. Now I'm going back to the mountains and adding a few snowy highlights and just a touch of light along the ridges to help them pop against the moody sky a little bit. Still using Cascade brush here. Even though it has a strong texture, it actually works really well for these softer details too. I'm mostly just using lighter pressure and a larger brush size. I'm also starting to build up some fog and mist at the tops and base of the mountains, and along the lower part of the land, just kind of gently tapping the brush, letting the texture suggest that there's a soft haze there without fully painting it in. This step really helps push the background further away and adds that almost dreamy atmospheric depth to it. And you can even use a light gray or slightly desaturated blue here. It doesn't need to be pure white to feel misty, if that makes sense. And I'm keeping this mist on a separate layer too, just so I can control the opacity and soften things if I need to. And even these little touches really go a long way in creating that feeling of distance, and I find that less is more when it comes to like more atmospheric effects. Now I'm switching back to the Highgrove brush to add more detail to these mid-distance dark trees. I'm using a slightly smaller brush size and layering on these deeper tones and dark green or dark gray. It gives the trees a little bit more structure and definition. Just kind of dabbing and gently pulling the color to keep that natural painterly look. And once I've built up enough texture, I'm actually switching Highgrove over to the smudge tool, and this brush blends really, really smoothly, which helps me soften out any kind of harsh lines or chunky pieces. Now I'm switching back to Cascade, using it to add a few shadows underneath the tree line in between the tree shapes. It gives that nice kind of pulled texture, which makes the shadows feel a little bit more organic. I don't want it to stand out too much. I find it really helpful to combine the use of brushes and then switch back and forth between the smudge tool. I think it makes it look a little bit more realistic, and these smaller details, they really start to pull everything together. Next, I essentially repeat the same steps, but on a much smaller scale. So I go back and forth between Highgrove brush, Highgrove using the smudge tool, and Cascade. Still working with the Cascade brush, now I'm starting to work my way into the foreground, just laying in soft patches of color to build up a little warmth. I'm using a mix of pale yellows, soft greens, some dusty pinks and purples. Nothing too bold yet. I'm keeping things pretty muted with a little bit of pops of color, but I want it to blend seamlessly into the rest of the scene. I love how Cascade lets me sweep and pull these colors around. It adds a really nice feel to the ground or the meadow area without needing to overthink it. And at this point, I'm mostly thinking about color balance and flow, placing these patches to gently guide the eye forward without taking too much attention away from the background just yet. This soft base is going to give us a nice foundation for the final details, especially when we start adding the florals and those textured finishing touches. I've jumped back to Highgrove now, just reducing the brush size to add in some quick stems across the foreground and off in the distance. I'm keeping the strokes pretty straight and simple, just enough to break up the softness of the color patches and create a little bit of structure. This step really starts to anchor everything together. Now let's use a new brush. This one is called Moonlit, and this one is really, really fun for finishing touches. It gives you soft, almost daubs of texture that feel really natural and painterly. I'm adding a mix of abstract florals here, just some loose circles and some tiny speckles scattered across the foreground, going for a dreamy, overgrown meadow kind of look. Now, some of these are meant to be eucalyptus leaves, others like tall lupines, but honestly I'm keeping it pretty loose and impressionistic, using soft color palette, pale blues, pinks, muted purples, almost a soft buttery yellow, and some whites to brighten everything up. This is probably my favorite part of the whole painting, just kind of adding those extra colors and textures. It really makes the painting come to life. Back to Highgrove now, using a dark green to add some subtle shadow work across the foreground. I placed it on a new layer and set it to multiply, gave it a soft Gaussian blur to help it blend into the background scene, and after that I reduced the opacity a little bit, enough to really deepen those areas without overpowering the softer details underneath. This may feel like a small step, but it really helps everything give the florals a bit more contrast to pop against. Reduce the opacity on the stems. I felt like they were standing out a little bit too much. I am wrapping this up by adding a few more details to the dirt road. Back to Cascade for this part, adding some soft shadows and highlights, give it a little bit more dimension, and use the smudge tool to gently blend everything together. And this part is very subtle. It helps the road feel a little bit more integrated into the scene. It's like it's winding through the landscape instead of just sitting on top. Alright, that is the finished painting. I hope this gave you some ideas or inspiration for your own digital oil pieces. If you want to try the same brushes I used today, you can grab the free brush sampler. It is linked below and includes Highgrove, Cascade, and Moonlit, so you can start painting right away. And if you loved how these brushes feel, I've also got the full oil painting brush pack available over on my Patreon, with tons more textures and tools to explore. Thank you so much for hanging out and painting with me today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment if you would like to see more videos like this, and I'll see you in the next video.